Okay, I'm not going to talk about housing. I am. But being a municipal councillor, you can get stuck on little items, right? You can have your special pet item, but there's a lot more to governance than just taking care of housing. Housing is certainly a piece of the picture. We're going to paint a little bit of a picture here. So I'm into this idea of revitalizing communities so that there's a resilient quality in them right now. So there's Inverness County, that's where I live. And hands up to the rest of the Inverness County people here. Shout out. Yoo-hoo! We got Lake Ainslie, and we've got Shetty Camp and where? Okay. What did she say? Oh, Wakeba. Sorry, Wakeba. Yeah, thank you. So we got people from the beautiful part of the Bradors, above the lake there, and up top by the National Park. So this is the story of what we're working on. We're trying to create a story because we need to know what our priorities are. You don't just build housing if you don't have a housing need. So up in Shetty Camp, where Noreen's from, there's not such a housing need. In Wakeba, there may be a housing need, right? And where I'm from, in the middle, there is. But this is the population data. So when you're dark red, you're really bleeding out population. When you're like us, a kind of little cherry red, you're going down, but not as fast. The population you're bleeding out is 0 to 35, okay? That's the population you're losing in rural communities. 55 and up, like myself, I'm not quite there, we're increasing the population. Then you need to know that when you look at the socioeconomic data, and this goes back to the last one that John was just talking about, where's the equity in our population? Well, we're actually, when you're bright green like this, that means you have the highest number of mean average income people, you have the lowest number of low income people, and you have the highest number of educated people. So look at the middle of Inverness County, an old coal mining area where everyone walks around like we're just too poor and too stupid sometimes to do anything. I'm not saying we do, but that's their attitude sometimes, right? And so then there's my district, and I call it my district because it's the one that I represent, but I don't own it anyway. But I have this district outlined in the red here. It zooms around there, and when you look at this, you get a picture of the land. The golden land is Crown land. That's owned by the government. The land that's blue is owned by people who live outside of Canada. So when you kind of look at it, you take a shape of what's there. The white land is land that's owned by people who are residents of Nova Scotia. This is the town of Inverness. That's all zoned land. And when you look at this, you just have to know context. The blue land is municipal land. The whole big area there, what used to be the old mine site, is a golf course now owned by a consortium of people. The land inside the town here, this is public housing. These are seniors' houses, but these red ones and the beige ones are all public housing. So you get a picture of what's going on, and if we actually started to shape the landscape there with populating it with change of ownership in the last year, you'd see a lot more foreign ownership of the town itself right now. So then you get this idea that if you want to create an affordable lifestyle for young families or seniors downsizing, you have to look at this land base as the proposition of staying in the town, right? Because if you live where I do, or where Bill and Maggie lives, you have to travel, you have to have 2 cars. It almost breaks the bank these days to keep those 2 cars on the road, especially with the quality of roads we have. Then you look at the context. You keep looking at context. You know, you're governing a whole population. Look at the number of not-for-profit organizations that exist out of this one district. There's 37 there. 37. All those are volunteer boards like co-ops. There's Sheehan Housing co-ops in there, the early years co-ops in there. But there's all sorts of things like palliative care, a hospital foundation, there's an arena, there's an arts center. You go on, and that's all volunteers that are all stakeholders in how your community creates a value proposition for why you live there, raise a family there, have recreation, arts, culture, and a place to die. Here's the housing picture. Now we might as well take a picture of the housing. So we have 71 nursing home beds, 1,242 dwellings in the whole district. The average assessment is 50,900. We have 329 occupied, 32 seasonal. This is right in the town. 60 rentals, 52 lots, 12 for sale, and 50 trailers. This is the Cape Breton Housing Authority. This is income assisted housing. So in Inverness, in the town itself, we have 36 family units, duplexes and single units. We have 241 seniors apartments. Do you just get a picture of what this is? And my value proposition that I've been working on here is this idea that in our community, We are recognizing the overriding challenges of rural communities in Nova Scotia and responding to the need to retrain and attract families with young children, because these are the ones that really are going to create a revitalized community. So you can't just be a retirement community without focusing on it, of which housing is a component piece. But this is generally what all our communities look like. A whole bunch of chaos. People trying to do everything all over the place. Organizing that is a constant kind of challenge for us. And the way I've kind of envisioned this is, if you think of governance, right? Everyone lives in a household, right? We have to decide who takes the garbage out, who makes the beds, who's doing the laundry. Does the roof need fixing? Do I need to get the tires changed in the car? Then that maps out into the next level, right? Where you may be part of a business, you may be part of the education community. Then that maps out into a municipality, right? It scales into a municipal budget where you have policing, you have sewer and water, you have all those not-for-profits asking for money. And then that maps out into a province and into a federal government, right? So we heard the comment that we should get the province and the feds going. We need to get the municipal governments figuring out what their priorities are. And it's not well done. I'm not blaming anyone, but we've not really done a good job of that. So when I look at my community trust, all those 37 not-for-profits have to be part of a trust that works together and knows each other. Think of bigger towns like Sydney have chambers of commerce, right? But do we have an overall umbrella in Sydney that holds all the not-for-profits together? Do we? But they do in Hamilton, and they do in Vancouver, and they're called the Vancouver Trust and the Hamilton Trust, and even little places in BC, Grand Forks, has a community trust worth $1.5 million, which all the not-for-profits access for $5,000, $7,000 to support programming, but they work together. So when I look at all the things I want to bring together so that I can prioritize, help the governance, strategic planning, so we can mobilize those assets and investments, that's a process. So I'm just saying that why I'm doing this is to unlock this potential of collaboration, right? It only can happen if we're meeting together like this with diversity. So we're all here because we care about housing, but I'm sure you care about lots of other things in this room. What are those other things that could create some mobilization to make the housing issue work? And when you think of all the diversity in our community and how hard they're working to keep it going, we need to kind of think of that process as always including as many as possible. I'm not going to go to that. Anyways, one of the ways that we've done this in Inverness County, just in the last year, in the budget year, we've offered $20,000 to each district for the municipal council to use to bring all those organizations together to help prioritize what you need. So the home and school raises like $3,000 at dances and everything else for a breakfast program for the kids. We might say that's a priority for that $20,000, and we might say some of it is to help the housing group get a project up and going for another $5,000. And we might say we need another $2,000 to do board governance training and bring Mark Sparrow in. Blessed soul he is. But that's the way we've got to start thinking and working on this. And this is the one piece I'm passionate about, that if you're going to invest in communities, you invest in children. Because when you look at this slide, this is where children's brains develop. Before they enter school, almost 90% of all the developmental milestones that will give you the architecture and the development for life occur. And yet we've done very little in our communities in Nova Scotia especially to anchor the lives of families with young children. I'm not talking childcare. I'm talking the things that happen in Sweden and Cuba that build this room full of families and children and grandparents so that we can build the best outcome for our children. This is where we got to go, as well as everything else. Because the life course problems, if you don't do this with children, you end up with all these problems that end up breaking the system. So this is what we're building in Inverness. This is going to have, it's going to couple the early years with the cottage workshop that's been going for 30 years. And the cottage workshop works with adults with intellectual disabilities to do training. So they're going to have a nice cafe upstairs with a clothing store, used clothing. Who couldn't use used clothing if you're raising children? And we're going to have downstairs an early years center, which is a drop-in, and it's also going to have a childcare. But you're going to see how this links to housing. I'm getting to the housing. When is he going to get to the